Blimey. Ooh, this is one hell of a jam jar you got here.
Every morning, the House of Mystery contains demons, angels, elementals, magicians, wizards, apparitions, adult language, and discussions. If you're easily offended, do not enter the House of Mystery.
All right, then. On with the show.
All right, hello, welcome everyone to the House of Mystery. This is Michael, your curator and host, and I'm in the studio, or in the House of Mystery, with David. Hello, David.
Hello, everyone.
No filthy things to inform me about?
Well, I don't think you want to know, sir, because, there's a lot of bad memories down in the basement from the ghosts.
Oh.
So, I think you want to stay out of there for a while.
What do I have to do to get some sexual memories in there? Can we get some sexual memories in
there
those?
There is, but there's some dark sexual memories down there.
Well, I might be open to that. Please, clue me in. Make me privy to all those sexual memories, David.
Sexual memories? I don't know if you want to know what that butt plug's been.
Oh, never mind. Jesus, listen, David, there's something to be said about subtleties, okay, and subtext, and allusions and implications. But you just go right in there, just like a butt plug.
As I said, there's a lot of bad memories down there because it's not just the ghosts you got to worry about, it's the utensils now.
Utensils, like forks, knives, napkins.
Dildos, you don't know.
It's implied, Dave. All right. So today, Dave, you and I are going to be discussing and breaking down Swamp Thing number 5, titled Survivor Bomb. This issue I was not prepared for. It was a deep dive into the philosophical and the political and essentially meshes them together to create a narrative that explores the causality of hate and prejudice in a synergistic, explosive tale that ushers in a very special guest spot, which is Mr. John Constantine.
Yep, and it's a guest spot that fans everywhere have been just yelling for.
Well, Dave, you and I have been saying this. Like, well, listen, we love what Ram V is doing with Swamp Thing, but there comes a time when you have to bring Constantine in, especially since we're dealing with a new avatar, the Green, and some of what he has done has made news headlines within this story. And the fact that John Constantine hasn't, made an appearance and said, hey, what the hell's going on over here? It was only a matter of time, right?
Yes, it's only a matter of time. And the thing I was really excited with is Constantine's one of those characters that every single writer that has tackled him has their own take on him. So getting a chance to see Ram V's take on John Constantine, while it's true to that character, I kind of like Ram V's version of Constantine because he's a little different. I'm going to throw caution to the wind constantly because I don't care.
Well, he's very Constantine.
Yeah, he's very Constantine.
And just to clarify here, Ram V isn't necessarily new to writing Constantine because he's been writing Justice League Dark now for over a year. So he is writing Constantine, but I have to say that this might be some of the best work Ram V has done pertaining to John Constantine or something that deals with John Constantine.
Easily.
Yeah.
Especially when the way he deals with the subject matter in the comic, it's very reminiscent of the Vertigo titles.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah. Ram V creates implicative parallels between bigotry and ecological disasters that connects to the previous issues in a way that ultimately adds to the bigger story that he's telling. Since issue 1, Dave, we've been exploring the contagion that is overtaking the Green. That is at the foundation, or I should say that is the foundation, it seems like, of this 10-issue run. A contagion that started with, I guess we could say, a bad memory of humanity. We've heard the words, not a memory the Green should have of us, several times, including in this issue, as Swamp Thing prepares to get rid of the unexploded bomb. Levi's brother did something, I believe we were talking about during our last discussion, that
Yes.
agitated the green. But it seems like there is a possibility that Ram V is actually saying that possibly Levi's brother's actions was a catalyst, or the straw that broke the camel's back, I guess would be an appropriate idiom, because it seems like the messaging here is that humanity is the contagion.
Yes. And that's what you kind of get the sense of, because like when at the end of the last issue where you have Alec Holland explaining about like something has contaminated the green, and you all of a sudden have like this almost like the last time I mentioned it was like the perfect puzzle coming together.
Yeah.
Since we've covered Future State or Future's End.
No, Future State.
Or was it Future
Yeah,
State?
you're right. Future State.
But when we cover Future State and we get to this point, it all comes together that this is the overall motif of Ram V's
yeah.
tale of Swamp Thing.
I love that you picked up on that. Yes.
It's about humanity. It's about the fact that the one thing that I've been saying is we've been focusing on the villains. You know, oh, he introduced Woodrow. He reduced the Woodrow, or he introduced the stranger in the desert, and we were all thinking too superficial. The real context of Ram V's story was getting to the point where it's the contagion, and the contagion is humanity.
Right. Yes. Now, you mentioned Future State, Dave. It may seem at face value that this issue here may contradict Future State a bit. It's
A bit, yeah.
it's a more pessimistic view of humanity and more accurate, in my opinion. Whereas in Future State, we get a more optimistic and hopeful framing of the human soul.
Well, it brings into question how did Swamp Thing get to that point? Because
Exactly.
this is how he
Yes,
starts.
Exactly.
But at the end of Future State, his message is never give up on humanity,
Yes.
the good of humanity.
Right. I feel like they're taking steps to blame humanity, but also at the end of time, essentially in Future State, that humanity may actually find a way to fix the damage they have done and become better.
And dude,
So we'll see where this goes, but honestly, it feels like an arc of a story in
Yeah.
reverse. We see the atrocities of humanity, but then in the end, after a type of comeuppance, where possibly humanity learns its lesson, we change, which is Future State.
yeah, and think about it. The choice of Constantine in this type of story arc that Ram V is telling is perfect, because while Constantine's a hero, he's not the best of humanity. I mean, even Constantine.
Oh, you
would
bite
say,
your tongue.
even Constantine would say he's not the best of us.
Oh, he is the best of us.
But like at the end of the day, though, even though Constantine is a bit of a douchebag,
Oh, come on. David, I'm going to jump over this studio desk and annihilate you.
even if he's like that, he still at the end of the day shows that even he has the good of humanity.
Yeah.
That he's still a good person in the very end.
Yeah. We will see what's happening, but it does seem like Future State and Infinite Frontier, Swamp Thing, they're working together to tell one singular story, which we kind of figured that, right, from the very beginning.
Oh, absolutely.
But
yeah.
now we start seeing these connections.
you start seeing the connections now.
So either way, I like the turn of events, the allegory that humanity is the cause of ecological disasters. Now we must pay the price.
Yeah.
And that's a classic. That's very classic of ecological horror or eco horror, which, if people aren't aware, is in fact a subgenre of horror. And correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but this is what Alan Moore used as a guiding template of sorts for the early runs of Swamp Thing, correct?
Yes, he did. Because like that's the whole crux of like Alan Moore's run of Swamp Thing, was to not only bring in the philosophy that he was trying to talk about, like the afterlife and resurrection, but he wanted to show that humanity causes damage wherever they go. And it's a
Yes.
very pessimistic point of view.
It's realistic too.
But exactly, it is very realistic.
Yeah. I've always been a softie for ecological horror. I feel like there's an intelligence to it, even if it
Yeah.
doesn't seem like there's intelligence overtly. Usually, there's some very strong statements within the subtext.
But it can be very easily like made into a very bad movie, so to speak.
Cheesy.
Cheesy movie when you
But
do
even the good
ecological horror stories.
Well, even okay. So you're right. What's the show or the movie that M. Night directed and wrote that ended up being one of his biggest disasters? I forgot what it was called now, but it was where the trees were fighting back
Trees
and
are
killing
fighting
people.
back, yes.
Okay, that was ecological horror, and the concept was on point. The concept was great. It's just the execution, but that's why you have to have complete control over your story and understand exactly what you want to do, because the whole idea of nature fighting back sometimes can come off as cheesy.
Yes.
Now, if people aren't aware of some titles within ecological horror, I'm going to read through some of the bigger, more obvious films over the last, I guess, 90 years.
And the good ones, right?
Well-
As you said, I mean, The Happening. It's
The Happening, that's what it was. That was such a shit movie. I tried so many times with that one. Holy shit. And the thing that sucks about that, you know what's worse than a sucky movie is when the concept is really fucking good.
It's good.
Yeah.
But the delivery is bad.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason why Mark Wahlberg is a meme in that.
Yeah. So the very first film that's considered ecological horror is King Kong.
Yeah.
1933. The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, Godzilla,
Godzilla.
The Creature from the Black Lagoon, Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, The Wicker Man, Jaws, Piranha.
Yes. But I don't know if you would call that good.
I think one of the bigger ones is Jurassic Park,
Yeah.
Messing with Nature,
Messing with nature.
which is what most of this is about. What happens when humanity has pushed the limits? Nature must retaliate in order to survive. And many times, this is why Swamp Thing's such a great concept, because many times nature chooses an avatar of sorts as its champion, as in, or I should say, as is the case. I'll spit it out eventually here. As is the case with Jaws and Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
So ecological horror in concept is very good. It allows for some very intellectual thoughts on the damages that humankind inflicts on nature. All right, so fleshing out the political commentary a bit more, Dave, using philosophical theory to express a thought on socio-political issues is the best way to talk about politics. I mean, to state the obvious, like, racism is bad.
Yes.
People of color matter too. It just comes off as hokey
Yes, it
and
does.
soapboxing because, listen, we get it. Black people are people and Mexicans are people. And racism is bad isn't necessarily a bold statement. Like, we get it. We all, even racist people, know that racism is bad. So when you state it overtly, like so many hack directors and writers do, it just comes off as bad. But when you are someone like Ram V, who uses subtext and philosophical thought to flesh out an idea and make a statement, it's so much better. It's so much better and just, quite frankly, just more intelligent. And to the one who's a thinker of, or who, I should say, has a philosophical mind, it's just insulting at times when people make those obvious statements.
Yes.
And to use philosophy in this manner, it actually does make perfect sense because in its earliest form, recorded form anyways, it's tied to political discourse and theory. It has been used to form societal ideologies around ethics and morality. So through this lens, Ram V explores what I'd say was the core of this issue, and that is that ideas carry more potential dangers for humanity than its tangible counterpart, whether it be someone or some people like Hitler, the alt-right, the alt-left, or any other political proponent that uses hate or fear as a platform.
And not only does it affect the living, but it also, the thing I really enjoy is the concept that Ramvi threw in there is it's not just the living that's affected. It is every single thing that even down to man-made objects. You know, like objects you wouldn't think would carry that quote-unquote memory, but it does when you think about it, because the object in question was made for a purpose. So in essence,
well, that's why it's so. You're talking about the bomb,
yeah.
Right,
So
right.
in essence, it does kind of have its own sentience. It has its purpose.
It's definitely representative for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much nuance that can be interpreted to have meaning. As you mentioned, the bomb, but also the drone was one of the most, I felt, just smart aspects, because the droning aspect, the sound that the character heard that drew him to the bomb and essentially create or caused him to merge with the bomb is representative of insidious political rhetoric. That's what the droning is.
Yeah.
It never stops. It crawls its way into our minds, where it stays like a parasite, growing and thriving until it consumes our way of thinking.
Yes. And this type of idea or story idea or like narrative thought is very similar to what we saw in Hellblazer, about everything basically an idea coming to life. It's not
a thought form.
A
Yeah.
thought form. Thanks.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to figure out. What was the term that they used? But it was a thought form,
Right.
a tulpa. And it's in essence, Ram V took the idea of a tulpa and took it further.
Yeah.
And he said it's not just what it creates, but it's also what it affects.
Yeah, you know what, Dave? These people creating tulpas out of racism, they're doing it all wrong. Because if you're going to create a thought form, create like a hottie. Like, I'm thinking really hard of Zatanna and Caprica 6 from Battlestar Galactica. I'm going to create them. A tulpa version is going to manifest itself in front of me, and I'm going to live happily ever after with a thought form. Like, they're doing it all wrong. They go to hate. Go to lust. Lust over hate wins, right? Every time.
But see, here's the problem though, Mike. If you do that, lust can be, like it could be deformed and twisted.
Oh, yeah.
And suddenly you have tentacle porn.
Yeah, but if it's a thought form, is it wrong? There's a see, listen, Dave, I can get philosophical too. I just posed a philosophical question pertaining to morality.
There you go.
Yeah.
See, that's how it's done.
See, Ram V, I can do it too.
You do it too.
And this takes us back. Let's get right back to. Well, actually, that doesn't take us back. That takes us further away from our topic. But let's bring it back. Let's go back to the ecological aspects. There was a strong statement being made that, and I believe you alluded to this a moment ago. We are the disease that destroys the world.
Oh yeah, yeah. Especially when you actually, there's a moment in the comic where you see them connecting with the bomb, and then Swamp Thing makes the comment that this feels familiar, and then suddenly you see like a picture of where all the bombs landed, and then that's when you start seeing the story arc that Ramvi, or his narrative theme that he's saying is everything has its own memory.
Yeah.
And in essence, this is the corruption.
Yeah.
Who created the memory? Humanity.
Yeah. Listen, Ram V is my type of guy. Like, he's right. Humans are the biggest destroyer of all things. Honestly, this is a thought I had during the earliest stages of the pandemic, bringing it into real life for a second here. When we were on lockdown, the world flourished. Nature flourished.
Nature flourished.
Life flourished at record-breaking numbers. If you remember, Dave, I was actually posting things on Facebook about this. When we were first in lockdown, it took 2 weeks for the waters in Sicily to completely become clear, and you can see the bottom.
And you can see the bottom.
Dolphins returned. They were swimming within the cities. I believe on the shores of, I want to say Australia, I believe it was, or no, Brazil. You had thousands and thousands of turtles giving life.
Yeah.
Animals were thriving.
Oh, yeah.
We're thriving. How
Even-
much more
even in-
evidence do we need to see that we are the disease? Dave, it took 2 weeks,
2 weeks.
for life to flourish. 2 weeks of us not using cars.
Do you realize
2 weeks of us keeping our fat asses in our homes for life
Do you
to
realize
survive, or to flourish, I should say.
one of my favorite moments that proved your point
Yeah.
was in California when they started showing the streets empty and animals were freaking walking down the
Yeah.
street.
Yes.
Why? Because there's no humans.
Yeah.
There's no one to freaking shoot at them.
Yeah. Well, dude, it even goes further. Pollution.
Pollution went down.
Within 2 weeks, pollution dropped to levels that we have not seen in multiple lifetimes. 2 weeks, Dave. That's all it takes.
And see the beauty of this type of storytelling, because so we're seeing the beginning of it.
Yeah.
We see the evil of humanity and that pessimistic side that is John Constantine basically saying, yeah, humanity fucking sucks.
Oh,
But we have to work up to Ram V's goal, which is
the future state.
a future state,
Yeah.
which is how do we prove that humanity matters?
Yeah, listen, this is where Ram V and I veer into different directions, because there is no optimism in my viewpoint.
There is no optimism.
Future state should have ended with Swamp Thing killing off all of humanity. I mean, just think about it, Dave. If you remove a species of animal, okay, typically it rains havoc on an ecosystem.
Yeah.
Okay, for example, bees. If bees die, we
Oh,
die.
Oh, everyone.
All
does.
of life dies.
Yes.
If you remove us from the equation, life gets better for the entire world, Dave. We
Nature
are a
grows.
disease. We do not belong. That's what was proven during the pandemic. So, keeping that line of thought at the top of your head for a moment, that's what was being used as the guiding template or theme for this issue. But even bigger than that, for his entire run so far, starting with Infinite Frontier Swamp Thing #1, the contagion is humanity. The contagion is the fact that the nature, if you will, cannot reconcile with humanity's grotesque nature.
Nature. That's why one of the most important lines of the comic, in my opinion, that ties into that is when Swamp Thing basically says this is not how we should be remembered.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
And
Well, and how many times? I mean, he said that in issue #4. He
Yeah.
said that in issue #4 that this is not how the Green should remember us. And then once again, it was reiterated in issue 5 when Swamp Thing is taking that bomb to an SS abandoned island or concentration camp.
Yes.
He says this is not how the Green should remember us. And why? Because it's the source of the contagion. These horrible memories, these atrocities that were committed by people, evil thoughts, racism, prejudice, bigotry, all of it. It's a very powerful, strong statement.
It
and
is.
if I was, let's say DC executive and Ram V pitched this to me, I would be a little suspect at first. Like, oh man, that's a lot of fucking seriousness, and it's gonna come off hokey as fuck, man.
oh, easily, especially since, philosophy wise, it spits in the philosophical argument
Mhm.
that, history should be remembered, because if you don't remember history, you're doomed to repeat it.
Right.
So Ram V is essentially his philosophical statement is just spits in the face of that and says, no, these things need to be forgotten because look at the damage it's done.
Yeah. I mean, I could definitely see that point. I mean, Ram V is just, he's killing it.
Oh, he is. It's
He's
cool.
killing it with allegory, metaphor, subtext, philosophy. I mean, this guy gets it. I hope. Give this guy another 12 issues of Swamp Thing.
Please.
Give him a blank check, in fact. Just say, hey, listen, Ramvi, you write anything, anything, just gear.
Oh, no. Don't say anything, Mike.
No, write
Don't say
anything.
Because if they say anything, suddenly they're going to have him show up in Batman.
Oh, listen. Okay.
That's what I said, not anything.
On that blank check, just put, like if, you kids out there might be too young to remember checks. You probably don't even know what a check is or a blank check. But many years ago, a source of or a type of tender was a piece of paper that was rectangular. And you would just write on it, and that was your money. Well, in the little corner, there was something called memo, and you can write what the check was for record purposes. And in that little memo, just write, for anything but Batman.
Anything but Batman.
Thank you. Yeah, that's exactly what I would do. In fact, you know what? I would just kill Batman off.
Just kill him off.
Ram V, here's a blank check, and it says in the memo, kill Batman.
Although, in regards of choosing characters that Ram V needs to cover, when it comes to the Swamp thing, I've been finding that his choice of characters to call back to has been incredibly smart. I mean, here in this issue, we have John Constantine, who is the epitome of like the ugliness of humanity, but he's still a hero. He's still a badass, but he's not he's not the nicest of men. But then also in the very end, bringing in the Suicide Squad to continue your theme.
Yeah.
Dude, he's like doubling down, and I'm trying to figure out if Ram V's point is to show that humanity is worthy of this world.
Yeah.
He's like stacking the deck constantly against it. And I'm like going, how are you going to prove, Swamp Thing right?
Yeah. Well, what are they trying to do now? It looks like they're trying to capture him to make him
into a weapon.
That is exactly what humans would do.
That's exactly.
Hey, look we just discovered a creature that knows how to interact with nature. Let's fucking capture him and turn him into a weapon. Solid plan. Fuck us. That's why aliens don't talk to us. People are like, the aliens are out there. Yes, they probably are, and they fucking stay away from us. They put a beacon, not a beacon. What's a probe? They put a warning probe just outside of our solar system, and as a warning to all life. That's why we never see aliens. That's why aliens never come here, because some smart alien species put a fucking probe out beyond the solar system. As they stay away from this planet, they'll find a way to fucking kill you.
They're a bunch of assholes, and we've probed all their assholes.
Listen,
already.
Their technology is dismal compared to ours. We could probably kill them, but these humans are resourceful when it comes to their tyranny. They will find a way to destroy us. Stay away, please. Yeah. So switching gears back to narrative and story. Ram's assertion that everything is connected is a tethering device that brings cohesiveness to the world of DC, specifically the duality of Swampy and Constantine. Both are different, but each serves, or I should say, what's a better way of saying that? Both are different, and each serves a different master, but is all part of the same highway of memory and information.
Yes.
A history of all life on this planet. Now, Dave, you are the bigger DC comic book reader than myself. I mostly stick to Constantine and the darker side. That's new, correct?
It is. I mean, like this concept that Ram V's tooling around.
It's kind of like a restructuring, because I know there's been elements like that, but he's reworking it.
He's reworking it because originally you have this in the DC universe, you had this separation between the quote unquote the green, the red, and then you had introductions by like, Jeff Johns and everything with the black and the light, and everything else. But it's always been that, divided. It was
Right.
it was very visible.
Right.
Here, Ram V is like saying, no. Everything is mixed together
Yeah.
to make a bigger end.
It feels like, and I could be getting my metaphysical philosophy fucked. It's been a while. It feels a lot like Gaia. Gaia, like Mother Nature, power from Earth, it's all connected. Everything is connected. There is no separation.
Yeah.
All elements have its own purpose, but in the end, everything's together.
Everything's
It's
together.
a part of Gaia, Mother Earth, nature.
Yes.
That seems like what he's doing. He's bringing it all together. And I don't think that has anything to do with metaphysics, but, I'm an idiot sometimes.
No, it could be. I mean, there's a lot of concepts in just these, 5 issues that Ram V has been toying around with since the beginning. I mean, not just the 5 issues, but also, like you have future state.
Indian mysticism. That's what I was.
Yeah,
That's the phrasing I was looking for.
He is pulling on every like metaphysical, philosophical idea and trying to make it into a superhero comic, and he is succeeding.
He is succeeding, because you would think if you're pulling various ideas that it may start feeling contradictory, but it doesn't. It actually has it has
symmetry. There's like a weird symmetry to it.
Yeah, it works together. Hold on a second. I'm gonna look this up. I want to see what I was trying to think. I'm thinking Greek mythology, which is Gaia. It's the personification of Earth. So there's a mixture of various different cultural mysticisms being utilized.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. And yet it all feels complete. It all feels like it goes together.
Yeah, because it could easily, in another writer's hands, I feel that 80% of the time...
90.
You think 90?
Yes.
Because
most people can't handle this much stuff.
Yeah, because it's really difficult to write stuff like this.
It is. Especially comic book form isn't the easiest form to write. Many people think, oh, comic books. I know there are writer friends of mine who feel like it's very low art. It's considered low art. And I guess for the most part, yes, the mainstream titles could be considered low art. But that doesn't mean there aren't writers that excel in this field.
Yeah.
And are very capable in crafting very intricate stories that actually, I would say, matter.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a story like this matters.
Oh yeah, easily. I mean, in like some parallel universe out there, if Ram V ever was given the chance to do a TV or film version of his type of storytelling, I honestly think it'd be some of the smartest writing I've ever seen.
Yeah. If he can write TV and movies, though, I mean, that is also a different medium.
That's a different
that
medium.
may not be his
That's
knack.
That's why I said, like, in a parallel
Yes.
universe.
Yeah.
If he could do that,
Yeah.
I mean, that's why this type of storytelling is so difficult, and majority of the time you will see it solely in books and comic books.
Yeah. Yeah, so ultimately, it's really cool to see how Ram V has taken DC canon and reworking a few things that clarify or expand on what we know of DC. I like it. All right, so art, Dave. Mike Perkins is gone. I'm not quite sure how I feel about that. Now, I will say that John McCree, I believe is his name, he's taken over as for artist duties
Yes.
on this issue here. I'm assuming the rest of the run as well. And his work is really good, and I'll get into that in a second. But I get so frustrated, Dave, and we might have talked about this on an Oblivion Bar episode. I get so fucking annoyed when they change artists.
Yes, I know you do.
Now, if you're dealing with an ongoing run, let's say you're dealing with like just something that doesn't end, then I understand. Change out the artist, change out the writer. That makes sense. I
makes
get that.
sense, yeah.
But you're dealing with a 12-issue run. You're telling me you can't stick with one fucking artist for 12 issues so that we can have consistency in art?
Exactly. And
I don't get it.
this is going to be one of the reasons why I'm going to say this is going to be an example of why this comic is a little bit of a head scratcher for me, because I love the comic overall.
Yeah.
However, what John McCree did was he gave us a comic gave me a comic that
Oh, just you. How special.
that artist-wise,
Yeah.
I think I like John McCree's better.
No, I do too. No,
And-
that's where I was going to go with this.
And I'm like going, oh no, if Mike Perkins comes back, we're never going to get like this type of art. And I'm like going, this is why you don't change artists.
I know. Listen, now I love Mike Perkins. That's clear. And the previous 4 issues, or did he do Future State as well? I'm not sure. I think he did.
Yes.
So in the previous 6 issues, we love his
did.
work. It is gorgeous, fantastic work. And I do like John McCree better, but it still frustrates me that we change artist styles. I said this during an Oblivion bar, and I'll say it again for the bulk of our listeners who aren't subscribed to our Patreon feed. It's no different than changing your cinematography in a TV show.
Yes.
Imagine watching, let's say, something most people understand the look on Sin City without me having to explain the nuances of cinematography and different lighting schemes. So Sin City, let's look at the movie Sin City, Dave. That is, a form of German expressionism that then turned into a style that was used by directors during the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s that turned into a genre known as film noir, right?
Noir, yes.
So it's a very specific style. You're using high contrast, negative fill.
Lights and shadows.
Yes. Okay, imagine halfway through Sin City, you decide to light those areas up in the shadows. And you
everything
no
turns
longer
flat.
you no longer have negative fill, and it looks like a Superman TV show.
Yes.
It would throw you off. You'd be like, okay, what the fuck just happened?
Exactly. There's a reason why in certain storytelling, when they do like say side stories in the middle of the movie, because I've seen movies do that, they will choose a different cinematographer just so that they can get that feeling that, oh, I'm getting a secondary story. But if you do it without even, without even a thought process, it is absolutely jarring.
Yeah, well, and that's what they're doing with these comics. And
Yeah.
I don't remember. I quit reading comics so in the 90s when I was a kid, I read a lot of comics in the 90s.
Yeah.
I don't remember them doing that. Now, I don't have a lot to go on in the 2000s because I quit reading a lot of comics except for, Hellblazer, stuff like that.
Well, the problem.
But did they do that? Did they change artists in the middle of or I should say every 4 or 5 issues? Did they do that? Because it seems like something they do all the time now with
No.
comics.
And that was the problem back then. The problem the 90s, like the late 90s or mid to late 90s had was you only had a set number of artists and everyone had to do that art style. And the problem there was like everyone started looking the same, and unfortunately the styles would not change. They would not adapt for audience taste.
Yeah, I don't understand. I don't get it. I don't like it.
And a lot of people actually point to that issue in the 90s as the reason why we have quote unquote breaks in artists in the middle of series, because in the comic book industry they saw, well, during the 90s you had the comic boom or not boom but bust.
Yeah.
And why? Because a majority of fans felt everything was the goddamn same and everyone drew the same and it was boring. And then all of a sudden, like the big two were like going, we got to freshen up our writing room, and we got to actually bring in more new artists who have a different eye for things.
Hey, listen, I am open for new artists, and you're right. It's the same thing with any, form of work, period. Sometimes you need to bring in new life, to kind of change things up. Things can get stale. So I understand the changing of artists and writers.
However,
but when you're dealing with issue number 5,
yes.
And same thing with the Hellblazer run last year. Like, they would go 3 issues with Campbell, and then they bring in another guy for a single issue, then go back to Campbell, and then go back to the other guy for 2 issues. It fucks with your visual continuity.
Visual continuity.
I really wish they would stop doing that.
Especially since,
And yes, I'm bitching a lot, and I don't fucking care, okay?
well, McCree, the difference between McCree and Perkins, McCree is definitely, I don't know if the term is right, saying he's more abstract, but when you see a lot of his art, he relies on symbolism. He relies on like symbolism and metaphors everywhere. Like there's a page where he's talking about the memory of war, and you see just a panel of red and then silhouettes of soldiers. That is very different than Perkins.
It's like, yeah, you're right.
And that's why, you get those moments. Like, I love his horror elements that he threw in there. Like the man who basically melded with the piping in the building.
Do you like that there's a pipe coming from his dick? Like, come on.
I was like,
come on, John McCree.
Nothing was safe.
Yeah.
There was nothing
I'm going to
safe.
stick a fucking pipe right in his cock area.
They didn't want to stick it in his mouth. They want to stick it up his butt and through his dick hole.
Come on. Why? Why you got to do that to him?
Because
What did he do?
And that's the thing. Make it horror. Okay, I'm going to disturb you with this.
Can you imagine if this was turned into a film?
Oh
I
my
mean,
God,
the
dude.
body horror of that. Holy God, that'd be awful.
Even like the very end when he draws Swamp Thing getting blown up.
Yeah.
It's horrific. You see it's almost like watching his flesh dissolve.
Yeah.
Even though he's a plant-based organism.
Yeah, they definitely brought. There was horror vibes throughout so far, the opening 5 issues or opening 4 issues, but they definitely brought those horror vibes to the forefront.
And that's why
in this issue.
That's why I feel this is so weird for me, because I want to say the past issues. Some of the past issues have been fantastic. Some of my favorite. But like in regards to like what was my favorite issue visually, this one takes the cake.
Yeah, no, I agree. Without a doubt, Dave, I do agree. I totally dig his stylistic approaches for pretty much every reason you stated, so I won't reiterate. But there's also a late 70s, early 80s vibe that feels a bit like the Grindhouse era. We, of course, are getting those noir vibes as well that went up 100-fold with Constantine's appearance.
Oh, dude, that was one of the best introductions of Constantine I've seen in a comic, where you just basically, you already know who it is, but you don't see the face, but all you see is the lit cigarette, the grin, and then the matches.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay, it's John. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the desaturation of the low-key colors and some of the empty spaces brings that 80s style to the forefront as well.
Yeah.
I totally dug it. So I'm not against John McCree. So if John McCree is listening, because I know some of the creators do listen to our podcast, I fucking love it. Don't get me wrong. I'm just frustrated with the approach that DC takes. I don't quite understand. But
it's one of those
don't
things
change
nowadays.
again, all right? Don't change again. John McCree, you're here with us. Don't abandon us, okay?
Don't abandon us.
Stay with us. Stay with me, please.
Especially if you're drawing Constantine.
Yes, and if you try to leave, I will lock you in the basement of the House of Mystery, where there's dildos and
Butt plugs.
all types of utensils. Is that what you use? The word you use? Utensils?
Utensils.
Yeah. And that's not a threat, John McCree, okay? Well, maybe. Maybe it is. But if you try to file a restraining order, I will deny.
deny
that was a
everything.
threat. Yeah. And there's no way they could use this broadcast as evidence. That's impossible, right?
I don't think so.
Yeah. All right, so let's move into our final thoughts, I'm going to start us off, Dave. I'm
Okay.
just going to say straight out the gate, it's a 100%, Dave. It really is.
Okay.
There isn't a single flaw with issue 5. And not only is this singular issue just great, but it also smooths some of the rougher edges from issue 2. And it brings everything together in a very cohesive manner. So I'll leave it simple. Dave, how about you?
I am going to second that. It's 100 for me.
Whoa.
Because it's a great reintroduction to the relationship between John Constantine and Swamp Thing. Like, we didn't have to have this overblown, oh, John has to go find Swamp Thing or
Right.
vice versa. No, it's just they show up and he basically introduces Swamp Thing to his associate, and then all the Swamp Thing looks at him is, I remember you, John,
Yeah.
Constantine, troublemaker.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's all he knows.
Okay, hold on. That's another thing I forgot to mention. I love that they did that because essentially, like, this is such a great way to bring us a new Swamp Thing because it is a new Swamp Thing, but at the same time, because of that previous issue where they stressed the point that everything, even though this is a different avatar, a different human soul that's currently in control, the memories that are within the green are all one.
Yes. And that's why I appreciate.
And because of that, did we really lose Alec Holland? Not really.
Not really.
His memories are there, and we are saved from having to have some ridiculous introduction that we don't need between Constantine and Swamp Thing. Who are you? I don't know. Who are you? No, we know each other.
And that's
works.
why this team up has always been a fan favorite among DC fans.
Oh, yeah.
Because like everyone understands Swamp Thing and John Constantine when they're together. They're pretty much an ultimate duo.
They're an odd couple.
They're an
type.
odd couple, but still you understand the relationship, and that's what I
They're
also
a buddy cop.
It's a buddy
routine.
cop
It's a
element.
buddy cop routine for
and,
sure.
And Ram V basically understands that, and that's one of the reasons why it's one of the best kind of team ups of John Constantine and Swamp Thing I've seen in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And Ram V still knows to pay homage to like the history. He doesn't have to explain why this team up is awesome. Everyone knows.
Yeah.
And that's even between them. That's why I love the take where he says he calls him the Swamp Thing, and then Swamp Thing looks at him. I've taken many names, yes, and Alec Holland is a name I keep and yet is not mine to take.
Yeah. That's
And
good.
then even after that, John just basically goes, "Oh, okay, cool, good to see you, old friend."
Yeah.
And I'm like going, "That's their
It's
relationship.
business as usual.
Business as usual."
Yeah. So 100%, Dave?
Absolutely, it's
All right.
100%.
So 100% across the board here at the House of Mystery. I do want to take the time before we close out today's show to remind people to find us on iTunes. That is our preferred place to listen to our discussions. Please give us a 5-star review as well as a 5-star rating, as well as a review. We do need those in order to trigger algorithms so that we can cut through all of the podcast noise. We need people to just take the time out and give us that 5-star rating. And the more ratings we get, the more opportunities we are afforded that we can then give back to the listeners. But we need those. And I feel like it's a little uneven right now because our downloads are great. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this show. But our ratings are dismal, and I don't quite understand that disconnect. If you enjoy our show and you're listening episode after episode, then please give us a review and a 5-star rating on iTunes. Also, patreon.com/RainmanDigital if you want to get more of us discussing the world of John Constantine and its affiliations within the darker side of DC. Subscribe for just $1 a month. You'll gain access to a little mini pre-show we do pretty much before all of our regular discussions where we banter a bit about the latest John Constantine news. So you get more of what you like, and you can help us stay alive. So patreon.com/RainmanDigital. I want to thank all of our listeners. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
and good night.